The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. Africans are always kept in the dark. These people that came in contact with us took everything away from us, will never write anything good about us. They succeeded in twisting the narrative of everything to suit themselves. Today we have grown believing certain things that are not true, especially with that education they've given to the African. It was never meant to equip us with anything. It was meant to brainwash us, or it is meant to brainwash the African. So whatever we are fed with, that is what we go with, even to the point that our professors will tell you whatever you are telling them is not true, and they'll still be quoting the same thing that the same person who has come into contact with us, destroyed everything of ours, to us, proving their point. It is always these people that are the ones who did everything. Some of them even claim that they discovered Africa when we are already existing before you came. This man is exposing a lot of things. And these are the things that we, the Africans, we need to listen to, so that we can actually decolonize our mentality. There are people who believe that we have never been able to do anything. Everything thanks to these people that came into the continent to colonize us. That hadn't been that, the African would have been backwards. How will the African be backwards?
So a little bit of background on what I studied. I actually studied German philosophy, and the Germans that I was studying were quoting Ibn Sina. In other words, he's part of this thread that goes right into contemporary German philosophy today. So I want to put him into that. To do that, though, I have to start kind of far back. So about 290 BC, which is way before Ibn Sina, the Greek ruler, the Greek pharaoh of Egypt, his name was Ptolemy I, Ptolemy Soter, decided that he wanted to harness Egypt's incredible technological advantage. He picked Egypt as the place he wanted to be the ruler of. Because when Alexander the Great died, the generals scrambled, and each one tried to become the next emperor. There was an Alexander the Fourth, because Alexander the Great was the third. There was a fourth, but he was young, he was like 8. And so the generals didn't want to wait for this guy to become an adult. They wanted to take him out and then become the next emperor. And Ptolemy picked Egypt on purpose. He was in a position where he could pick, in part because of its technology. So he created the Great Library to be a place where that technology was brought into one location. The Great Library gets destroyed 680 years later in a moment of, regrettable religious fanaticism. An angry mob sets the Great Library on fire in 391 AD. Having said that, the library was already in a little bit of decline, but, then fix it, put some money into it, and get it going again. Don't set it on fire. So that's really the wrong answer. For our purposes, we get lucky. The reason we get lucky is because the Roman Empire, as it was going into decline, began setting all its other libraries on fire as well. And that's a catastrophe for the world, because we lose a lot of the material that had been generated up until that moment. So for example, when I was in school, I was taught that in 1492, Columbus discovered the Earth was a sphere. That's not true. That's not what happened. 600 BC, the pharaoh Neches sent an expedition around Africa. He believed he had a hypothesis that Africa was a continent completely surrounded by water. So he took Egyptian ships, and he grabbed some Phoenicians, because they were the best sailors on the planet, and he had them supplement the Egyptian crews, and they went across the Mediterranean to Morocco, and then from there they launched, and they went all the way down the west side of Africa and all the way up the east side of Africa. And the ancient Egyptians had already built a canal that connected the Nile to the Gulf of Suez, so the boats just went through and popped back out in the Mediterranean. They literally did a 360 around Africa. They completely circumnavigated it. And what they noticed was that the star formations changed, and the position of the sun in the sky changed. So when they got back, they went, there's only one possible explanation for what we witnessed, and that is that the Earth is a sphere. So literally 2,600 years ago, the Egyptians proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Earth was a sphere. There was no other explanation for what they had experienced. So Columbus 500 years ago didn't do that, right? But that's how we were taught history. And that's one of the things that has obviously motivated me in the type of talks that I do, is to break down these silly little things that we've done that are wrong. You know, like I was taught Henry Ford invented the car, which is really weird because he worked for Oldsmobile making cars before he started the Ford Motor Company. So he invented the car after he started working for a car company. Like, how did that happen? So weird. Daimler, right? The Germans invented the car. So, anyway. The reason why what happened in the Great Library was a catastrophe was we lost a lot of material. At one point, Aristotle went to 150 Greek city-states, and he either got a copy of their written constitution, or if they had only an oral constitution, he wrote it down. And he put them into one book. And then he did an analysis at the end, where he talked about what he thought worked, what didn't work. He did a compare and contrast analysis of all 150 constitutions. Every political scientist on the planet would cut off their left arm to see this thing. Maybe their right one too. I mean, you just figure out a way to write useless articles some other way. And we'll never do it because all the copies were destroyed. We have 1.5 of the 150 constitutions. We have Athens' constitution, and we know enough about Sparta's constitution that we can basically understand its structure. But we don't actually have it. But we know enough pieces that we got it mostly. 1% survived. There are works that we have lost that we will probably never read, but here's why we got lucky. Right before the Roman Empire had finished off the last of its libraries, a group of scholars in 410 AD decided to try and salvage this. They tried to recreate an academy that would replace the Great Library. They did it in Athens. They thought, let's go to Socrates and Plato's. Alexandria's out of the picture. Let's go to Athens and start over. 119 years later, in 529, Emperor Justinian I ordered that academy closed. When he did that, the scholars knew not to wait for the torches to come, set the place on fire. They grabbed the books, they ran to the port, they hired ships, they went to Antioch, they hired a caravan, they went by land to the Persian Empire, and then asked for political asylum from the Persians. And they didn't just ask for political asylum for themselves, they asked for political asylum for their books. And the Persians went, yeah. One of the reasons why the Persians were so excited was they got jealous of the Great Library in the 3rd century AD and built their own Great Library version in a place called Gondishapur. And so they just took those books and they integrated them in. We get lucky a second time, because then the Arabs are going to create the Arab Empire. So when they captured Gondishapur, instead of plundering the place, they were curious about it. And they asked the Persians to explain what they were looking at. And the Persians said, this is an academy. And the Arabs went, cool, we're not sure you know what that is. And they left it alone. When the Abbasids take over, the Abbasids go, we need to get those books out of the academy and bring them to Baghdad to see if we can harness that information. And they put money into harnessing that information. And that triggers what we call the Islamic Golden Age. And as a result, we have the ability to read most of Plato's works, most of Aristotle's works, some of Sophocles and Aristophanes' works. We know that Eratosthenes figured out the size of the earth, right? Because there was enough of that material that got from Athens to Gondi Shapur that the Arabs then preserved and then harnessed. Having said that, two of the first two big philosophers are Al-Khwarizmi. Al-Khwarizmi, of course, gets totally involved in mathematics. He's dabbling in a little bit of philosophy, but math is his real passion. And he's diving into Indian mathematics, and it takes off. And so Al-Kindi, of course, is trying to figure out how to mainstream Greek philosophy, because in his mind, it doesn't matter where the wisdom comes from, all wisdom is valid wisdom. And so he's working on that as a project. But in a way that a lot of that Greek information doesn't really take off just yet. And most of the Arab philosophers, or Persian philosophers, because a lot of them were Persian, and by the way, some of them were Christian as well, so it wasn't just Muslims, and there were some Jews involved. In other words, this was a multi-ethnic, multi-religious project. What they realized real early on was a love of Plato, but they weren't necessarily all that involved in Aristotle. What happens then is we get a guy named Farabi. Farabi really gets into philosophy, and he takes...
People still defend colonization, claiming they brought us education. But we know this education has never done anything good for us. Chinese are learning in their language. Japanese, Indians, Koreans, it is only Africa that we believe that before you can be educated, you should be able to read in your colonizers' language. We measure our level of intelligence based on how fluent you are in the colonizers' language. Sometimes you even see the comment section, people coming to be marking your grammar. We are still mentally colonized. We should understand that this isn't our language, because Chinese are very educated, very intelligent, yet they speak their language. So we have to know that these people never gave us anything good that will help us move forward. Everything of the African has been covered up. And as much as we try to educate ourselves, sometimes our own always want to listen or hear from Yolo Popo before they can believe certain things. And it's very good that today, thanks to social media, we can now educate ourselves. This is not a time for the African to be interested in things that are not necessary. Like Joshua Mampanga will say, as we are always busy discussing our iPhone system, our nails, our hair, our women and football, these are all signs to keep us backwards. This is a time that the world is actually getting prepared. Every opportunity these people get in their congresses, they discuss Africa, planning how they will come back stronger. But the African is always sitting down, unconcerned. We expect that these ones we have elected should do something. They can never do anything for us, because these ones are gatekeepers, and they are only there to sing and dance to the songs of their masters. The African must understand that we are the best. Everything that we see happening in the world today is from us. We brought everything into being. We are never inferior. And even as at that time, we were never learning their language. We were never being taught by them. But yet, we are able to do these amazing things. So what shows that if we should do away with the educational system that is crippling us, turning our youth into something else, we cannot do anything meaningful for ourselves. There are people who haven't been to school, yet they can do exceptionally well. They can invent things. So why are we not trying to fight these systems that these people have kept in place? We have to dig deeper to know who we are, because we are lost. We actually don't know what we are made of. And it is our duty to find ourselves, because Bob Marley said, in this journey, it is only you that can emancipate yourself. No other person can do it. We can only bring you the information, but it is you that can walk on that journey to liberate yourself. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world and in the United States of America.